Well, good afternoon. Welcome to another little video on this beautiful sundown in the dream in the year 2022. You have to accept things where you find yourself and where things seem to be, even if it is an illusion. And but knowing, of course, that it's not true, that it's not your reality. But if you're not in the acceptance of things exactly as they are, it makes it incredibly awkward or even perhaps impossible to process your own denial through the action of forgiveness. So when you're reading like A Course in Miracles or any sort of spiritual writings, true spiritual writings that tell you the world's just an illusion, it's easy to get caught up in that and just walk around going, oh, it's just an illusion, don't worry about it, don't worry about it, it's just a dream. But you have to be authentic, and that's a word everybody likes to use these days, authentic. I don't even know what that really means, but honest is a good one. And accept where you find yourself. It's like, well, I'm reacting to the figures and to the situations in my dream as if they were actually real, therefore, so I must believe they're real somewhere in my mind. Right? I don't want to take that reaction and fob it off with a concept that says there is no world, because that's just spiritual bypass, which is, or we used to say in the old days of it, two-stepping. If you're a 12-stepper, you go from the beginning of the 12 steps to the last step, miss out all the work in the middle. But spiritual bypass seems to be the word most people are using these days, or the term for that. So yes, there is no world, but that's not where I find myself. And this morning I had it was a bit startling really, because I kind of figured that I was going to have a rest period. Seems to be like it's an illusion of going through stuff, but you have to face the illusion where it is. So it seems to be in the last couple of months I've just been going through so much stuff, and people will out there who are actually participating consciously in their transformation, in their spiritual maturation, will tell you the same thing. And whether you want to say, oh, there's a retrograde this or a shift occurring in that, it doesn't matter. You don't have to try to work it out. It's just like, you know, when you're going through stuff, because it's emotional, it's upsetting, and you feel disoriented, and 1 minute you're peaceful and the next minute, what the hell's going on? So it's always helpful just to sit down and look at things exactly as it is, rather than to react to it. And this morning I reacted to it, which when I saw that I'd reacted to it, it was a little way down the track, and it wasn't without the help of one of my mighty companions, Rosie. Thank you, who told me to just to breathe and to let it all go, right? Do the work. And it took me a minute to actually latch on to that. It was hard to hear it for a second, because my mind was focused on what I thought the problem was. And in this case, it was, I guess, well, I identified it. I mean, you have to identify these things for yourself, these blocks, right? So if you're using the Course in Miracles, there are 4 basic blocks. The desire to get rid of peace, right? Because the goal of the Course is inner peace. So you look at your desire to get rid of it in whatever situation. The belief the body's valuable for what it can offer. The fear of death, and the fear of love, which is the fear of God or self. That's the big one. The last thing we want to do is love ourselves unconditionally. Right? But anyway, so this morning, having been only last week, as an idea of time for a second, but only last week, processing through some pretty deep and intense stuff regarding the second block, that the belief that the body's valuable for what it can offer, and finally having a little breakthrough, a little shift with that wasn't as profound as I thought it would be. Finally having a little shift with that wasn't as profound as I thought it would be. I just kind of assumed there would be a rest period. Got some truck or something coming around the corner. But not to be, that's not to be. So I got a fair square look in the face at the idea of the third block, which is the idea, the fear of death. So, and of course, if you are, I don't know if that's too noisy in the background, that truck, but there's a heavy vehicle going on, and we've got a dirt road down here that leads up to my place, and they grade it every now and again after the heavy rains. I think that's what's going on. Nothing's ever guaranteed to be perfect and peaceful in time and space. Things, oh, there we go, they're done. Things just come and go. So looking at that third block then, the fear of death. Now, if you're a Course in Miracles student, you know that it's not really the fear of death, right? It shows up as, oh my God, I'm going to die, right? But that fear of death is something that in the subconscious, we love that, we want that. That's the whole paradigm of time and space. Everything here is born and everything here dies. And that's the story we tell ourselves from the moment we find ourselves to be reasonably self-aware here to the moment that we actually make our way into our casket, unless, of course, we have a spiritual epiphany or a spiritual happening halfway through our sojourn here, and start to look at the ideas of death and in a reasonable way, where we can come to our own conclusions about it regarding our spiritual destiny and rather than our temporal destiny. And so in the Course, when you're looking at the fear of death, and it was cold and icy this morning, it was pretty tangible, I tell you. I wasn't happy, Jan. It was, we have a commercial here where the woman leans out the window and says, "Not happy, Jan." I don't know if you have that in the rest of the world, but I forget what the commercial's about. But everybody in this country remembers "Not happy, Jan," and we all have this kind of, it's a catchphrase. But I wasn't happy this morning. I wasn't happy, Jan, this morning. And it caught me up, right? This whole story caught me up. And it was about the United Nations and the everybody signing this pandemic treaty and the whole thing going along with that. So mandatory vaxxers, mandatory detention, all of this sort of like crazy, like how crazy does it have to get, right? Now, apart from the fact that I recognise it was me that calls it crazy, me that calls it whatever it is, trying to locate myself in the dream, trying to give something in the dream a meaning one way or the other, it caught me up, and I found myself for a second looking squarely at the idea of what I would do if that was to become reality in the dream, reality in the framework of the time-space reference. And I started to look at it on that physical level, and of course lost sight of my spiritual bearing for a moment and went down the rabbit hole, and halfway down the rabbit hole, I guess, or at some point down the rabbit hole, bumped into one of my mighty companions who said, "Hey, we're going this way, remember?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, thank you, thanks for that." But I had to sit there for a second with that reminder and process, right? That whole package of energy that represented the fear around that idea of death. Now, as I was saying before, it's not death that you're afraid of, it's what lies beyond it. It's love, right? Death is the game you play with yourself. Like it says in the Course, we love death. Death, we've died many times in this dream or that dream. We've had these death episodes that trail along throughout our lives, you know, and the first block is the desire to get rid of peace. Everything within that framework is a reflection of the idea of death, even the smallest sigh of discontent. So I had to look at that whole package of energy and sit in it for a second. It didn't take long, actually. I had to sit in it for a second, and I think Rosie even said to me it won't take long. It didn't take long. It was just probably 1 minute, maybe, not even. I sat there and I just offered the whole story to the Holy Spirit. Not the story of how I was going to die, but or felt like I could die if this scenario came about, but the story of that I think I'm a body, and this in relationship to this, and the story of that I actually want this drama of death. It's like, holy cow, I reacted to it, therefore I must want it, because what you react to is what you want, right? You wouldn't react to anything in a dream unless you actually wanted to. And like the power of mind is always proactive. You're getting the results of your own thinking, and there's no shady areas, there's no circumstances or maybe in this. It's either yes or no, okay? You're either dreaming or awake. And this morning I fell back into dreaming for a moment, which is cool. Luckily, mighty companions nearby. I fell back into dreaming and had to process it. And I was driving my car just after that. And actually, I like driving. I talk to Jesus a bit when I'm driving, you know, and it's like I seem to have this clear space in my head driving, or same thing when I'm sitting meditating. Oh. And in my car, I started laughing at the idea of me forgetting that this was just a dream. It's like, oh yeah, that's right, it's just a dream. There's nothing actually going on here. I'm not this body. There is no world. And I've got all this energy that's trying to deny that. We call fear, fear of death, fear of what lies beyond death and all of that sort of stuff, which I've deliberately made up to defend myself against love. And I had the release of it driving along in the car. And if you go through, probably even the video just before this one, my midnight video, right at the very end of that, the last few minutes of that, I actually have a release regarding my daughter and all my concerns about her and her future and all whatever it was, everything that embodied that package of energy that she represents in me. And it was the same sort of release. Well, it's always kind of like a similar release. You'll either cry or scream or laugh or vomit or something. It's just emotional and energetic and whatever. And on the flip side of it, on the other side of it, there's this kind of like restoration of peace for a moment until the next thing. But so that was today, and I just wanted to make this video about it to hold myself accountable to the fact that I had a taste of the third block today, and I've sort of been looking at it, and I mean, the last block to peace is believing that there is one, but it's like I don't want to spiritually bypass where I seem to find myself, you know. I could easily say, oh, there are no blocks to peace. I choose for peace now. But that's not where I found myself this morning. I didn't want to transcend where I found myself this morning. I knew I had to transform rather than transcend, transform my thoughts about it so that I wouldn't have to be continually transcending them to escape when they come back again and again and again. And I had a moment midway through the day after that today where on social media somebody presented me with those ideas again, reflected back to me those same ideas that I reacted to this morning. And the reaction was still there, but it was incredibly minimal, and I could see that it was fading. It's like it's just tapers off, right? Now, the healing's immediate, right? When you ask for the miracle, when you ask for the healing of your mind, it's immediate. But my ability and your ability, the ability for the mind to process the immediacy of the healing in time, right? There is no world right now. Right now, there is no world. But in time, there still seems to be the residue of a world, the residue of a dream that even though we say, or we're told in the Course it's long ago over, still seems to be witnessing to here. And I'm still seem to be having to go through the process of self-forgiveness to free my mind from my attachments to it. All right? And that's done, of course, with the Holy Spirit, with the power of God within, not because I've got any kind of skill how to do that. Although I'm not separate from the Holy Spirit, I am what the Spirit of wholeness is in my truth, not as Dave, this avatar. I don't know if that makes sense, if you can hear that. If you're advanced in your own thing and you've had these level confusion ideas worked out for a while, you'll be okay with it. But otherwise, you're probably sitting there, scratching your head, wondering what the hell I'm talking about. And it's easy to get caught up in the level confusion of where you're referencing yourself as this temporal association, and also at the same time or in the same sentence as the non-temporal entity of Christ mind, or Buddha mind, or Krishna consciousness, or whatever you want to call it. Doesn't really matter. So I just thought that was cool. I'd make a little video about it, and it was deep, and I can still feel, now that I'm even talking about it, I can still feel the presence, or the departure, the lifting of the veil, the disappearing of the mists around that idea of the fear of death. And of course I talked myself into a logical acceptance of it, which isn't the healing, but I talked myself into a logical acceptance of it at first as like, all right, well, if that's how it's going to look, that's how it's going to look, and like whatever it's meant to be, it'll be. And I gave myself all these concepts to try and make myself feel better, rather than actually releasing the energetic package that it represented, until I finally released that. And even now, it seems, making this video, there's still a little bit of that weight being lifted from my shoulders, so to speak. I can feel this kind of like, actually it's gone now. That's how quick it happens. There was a moment just a minute ago, seemingly there's no such thing as a minute ago, but just a minute ago, where I felt the footprint of that idea of letting go of the fear of death sort of coming up as I was talking about it. And anyway, but we shall see. One of the things that I like to do with the course and with course learnings, even though now forget this course, that's another perspective to go beyond it into the direct awareness of God's presence. But one of the other things that I like is to be vigilant for the kingdom of heaven, whilst I find myself seemingly here within the framework of the dreaming. Be vigilant for the kingdom of heaven, which is my state of inner peace, right? And make note of what it is that draws me out of that state of perfect inner peace. What is the trigger? Because the trigger will lead to the block. This person said something, this person did something, this whole situation something, right? It'll reflect off one of those 4 blocks, whatever it is. It's not the situation and the something that you're dealing with. Otherwise, you'll be dealing with that forever and ever. Amen. But it's the block that you're looking at, right? So Jesus says in the Course, seek for the blocks and find them, right? The triggers are the catalysts for healing. The triggers and the button pushing in your life are the catalysts for the healing that you need to be looking at, which will lead you with the Holy Spirit to show you what block it is you're looking at. And if you're just new to the Course, it kind of proceeds in a logical, gentle manner and keeps you in pace with it. So the first one is the desire to get rid of peace. And you may have a lot of resistance to that idea. I don't desire to get rid of peace. I want peace. I want God. Yes, perhaps you do now, but that's not the original program. That's not the original script that's still running in the background, even though you've picked up A Course in Miracles and made a decision to change your life. You still got to go back into that old program for a second, erase that bit, which is the Holy Spirit will do it, and allow all those dominoes to fall that represent the situations in your life that reflect the denial that first block stands for. And so, and I hope that makes sense. And then on to the next, to the next, to the next. There's been times in my transformation where I haven't really been fully certain about which block I've been looking at particularly, and it doesn't really matter because it's only the one block. It's one single idea in truth. The idea of having 4 blocks is to make it easier to be able to relate to things when you're new at transformation and be able to see what it is you're actually attempting to do in your own mind. If I just simply said to you, we're transforming an idea of being separate from God, you'd be like searching in your mind, well, what does that even mean? If God is everything, how can I be separate? And you'll be convincing yourself, you know. But if I said to you the fear of death, you'd be like, ooh, ooh, don't want to look at that. Or the desire to get rid of peace. you know. And if that pisses you off, that Jesus is telling you that you desire to get rid of peace, then there it is, manifest. Oh, it upset me when you said that. It's like, why would it upset you? If you truly knew this was a dream, you wouldn't react to anything. It only upset you because you wanted it to upset you. Right? There's no victims here. There's no circumstances. The fact that you wanted it to upset you is proof of the pudding that the first block is actually intact, in place, and serving its purpose as you once gave it. Trying to get rid of peace. It's funny stuff. Anyway, I just wanted to put this video there. I hope that's helpful. It's definitely helpful to me. Finger on my nose. There's only you. All right. I love you.